It's been a fascinating World Economic Forum annual meeting over here in Davos, Switzerland, for all sorts of reasons. Firstly, the topics which have been identified this year: artificial intelligence, that's been a huge focus, sustainability. But the backdrop of all of this is the crisis that we face in so many parts of the world, the war in West Asia, the expansion of that war in the Red Sea area, the continuing crisis in the Ukraine. Amidst all of this, there's the India growth story. India, quite clearly an outlier to global growth, which is what, about 2.9%, India growing at more than 7%. Joining us now, a wonderful guest, Sir Martin Sorrell. Thank you very much, sir.
That was a Bollywood introduction.
Was it?
Yeah.
What for you was the highlight of Davos this time? Was it the themes picked up? Was it the India story, perhaps?
Well, I mean, obviously, the India story was, we had, what was it, 3 states who had...
4 states, actually.
4, was it 4?
And lots of ministries.
And lots of ministries. I think the coordination is important when you have that amount of effort. So that was a highlight. But I think, look, I think my sort of takeaway, as they say, was that people are a little bit more optimistic than I anticipated. I mean, that's English understatement. We had one session yesterday where, there were journalists in it, and the journalists tried to bring everybody back to what they thought was reality. The comment was, "You must be smoking something," because the people, there were government ministers, finance ministers, there were the private sector, including representation from India. And the general mood, when asked, do you think 2024 will be better than 2023, almost a majority of the people in the room put their hands up, which of course,
and said yes.
Yes.
That's surprising.
Which is very surprising, because coming here, there's the doom and gloom surrounding the 3. I mean, you touched on 2 of them. There's obviously US-China relationships, or lack of them, from which India benefits, actually. Secondly, there's the Russia-Ukraine situation, and thirdly, Iran, and who thought that we would have Iran and Pakistan trading missiles with one another whilst we've been sitting.
The leaders were sitting in Davos.
Yes, absolutely, and berating one another in Davos. So I think that's the biggest thing. You mentioned AI. There's a lot of chat around it. There's a lot of focus on it. We can get into the detail of how it affects our industry. The big thing for 2024 is the development of use cases, of case studies, of how AI is working and will work. That's going to be absolutely critical, because the chip producers, principally NVIDIA, are adding to capacity. They're selling chips like hot dinners. And they're selling processors like hot dinners. And the question is, does demand peak? So in order to continue to stimulate demand, there has to be concrete identification of opportunities. And that's going to be the task for 2024. For example, in our case, we get projects at the moment, $500,000 here, $1 million there. What we're looking for is the big technological transformation projects. The other thing I think about Davos is it underlines the 2 things that we see going on. One is geographical fragmentation. The days of Ted Levitt and the Harvard Business Review in 1983 of globalization and consumers consuming everything the same way, that still holds, but in a very much more fragmented way because of the 3 geopolitical risks, quite apart from climate change, North Korea and the other things that we have to deal with. So that uncertainty. So one thing is focus on the growth areas. That's where the India story becomes so potent and powerful. So North and South America, that block is going to become more and more important. I think it's fanciful to believe that America will become a traditional labor manufacturing economy again, with labor rates rising like the UAW agreement by 25% over 4 years. It's unrealistic to believe. You might build chip factories in Columbus, Ohio, between Brookfield and Intel, but if you want to deal with your supply chain, Apple and Tesla go to Mexico. So Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay.
Yes.
We'll see how Malay does in Argentina. That block, very important. Middle East, huge vision. You see it here on the promenade and in Davos, and not just Saudi, UAE, Qatar, huge vision. And these are visions that are not the usual nation branding thing. It's not just about the Olympics or the World Cup or Formula One or a combination of all 3. It's about changing the way that countries around the world globally think about Saudi, think about the UAE, think about Qatar culturally.
Is Davos getting more relevant than it was a few years back? Because people...
Well, I mean, it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for nation branding. I mean, that's it. So that's a second area, Middle East. Africa's probably a little too bouncy, a bit volatile, and then Asia, China, obviously, the world's second largest economy. By 2050, Asia will have three economies in the top five. It'll be probably the pecking order will be China, US, India, Indonesia, Germany. So three of the Premier League, if I put it that way, will be from Asia. Now, China, the big thing is, if you're big in China, do you really want to be bigger, given the Taiwan risk?
Yeah.
So India benefits from that. Companies with sort of smaller, as a percentage of sales in China, Unilever, I think, is around 7%, on to 9%. Reckitt's about 7%. The one company I was talking to yesterday, the CEO, they're 3%. So they will want to be bigger.
Yes.
But companies that have heavy production, BMW, for example, Mini has, I think, about 70% of its production in 3 JVs in China. Whether you want to go bigger, you want to alternate your sources of supply. And so India is really important in that context. Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, New Asia, going to become increasingly important. I didn't mention Europe. And Europe, the interesting thing about Europe is seen as being a cost center,
yes,
by our clients rather than a revenue growth opportunity. So one thing is about focusing where the growth is. That's where India benefits. The second thing is, going back to Europe, what do you want to do? You want to be more efficient. The world is going to grow more slowly. Inflation is going to be higher than perhaps we would like, or central banks would like, and interest rates are going to be higher than we've been used to. And in that environment, taking effective action, AI-driven technological transformation becomes important, not just in Europe, but worldwide. So those two things, geographical fragmentation, technological transformation.
But so Martin, let me ask you a little bit about AI and employment. The big fear is that people are going to lose jobs. Do you see that happening?
Well, if you put me on the spot, I struggled with economics at university, and I did read some Keynes, and it wasn't in the general theory. I think he did a special essay or book in 1933 around automation and its impact on employment. And he made exactly the same point, and we'll have more holidays. Now, he might have been 90 years too early.
All we may end up having.
110
may not have jobs.
100, So, look, it's affecting our business in 5 ways so far. First is visualization and copywriting. So what took us 3 weeks? 3 hours.
Right.
That's a two-edged sword, because clients look at us and say, you sell time. We should sell outputs, but you sell time. We want a piece of that. So that's a mixed blessing from our point of view, because we have to share the benefits. The second area is hyper-personalization. We personalize, for example, the work we do for Netflix. So we personalize at scale. We might produce 1.5 million assets for a campaign, use about 50 to 70,000. We can now do multiples of that. So that's more. So that's good news, because there'll be more content, more employment. The third area is media planning, buying will be revolutionary. You can reduce, digital is 2/3 of the world's media market. It's about 650 billion out of 950 billion. And that you can reduce to algorithmic analysis, and that's superior to the human brain, at least ultimately when it's well trained with good data. That's going to reduce the demand for labor. The holding companies have about 250,000 people employed in media planning networks. They won't be there in 3 years to that degree. Maybe halved, whatever it happens to be. Fourth area is general cost reduction. We're working with NVIDIA. We have an exclusive integration partnership with AWS and Adobe and NVIDIA, where we're reducing the cost of outside broadcasting, a cricket match or a football match or whatever, by about 90%. Instead of using a truck and amortizing it over 5 years, it's going to cost a truck will cost you about $8 or $9 million, so it's about $1.5 million a year. We can provide a solution, an AI solution, cloud-based solution for about $100,000, $200,000. And the final area, which is really interesting from my point of view, is democratization of knowledge. We have about 900 people working on Google, our biggest client. If I can get all of those people to understand what the other 899 know, you have a really effective fighting force, and you've made the company more efficient, they've flattened the structure, made it less hierarchic. So those are the impacts. What do I think that's going to result in? I think it will reduce employment. But, there's a not a strange thing. You see a little bit of it here at Davos. It's not focused on that as much as I think it should be. Work from home, work from anywhere, which wasn't created by COVID, but accelerated by COVID. Gen Zers, are much more flexible.
They're also a bit more lazy. They don't like getting to work.
That's a hard thing to say, Vish.
I'm not necessarily sure work from home has really worked. So many companies are saying, no, come back to work. Let's get more efficiency happening.
The academic research, the business school research, for example, at Harvard, is all around that it's more effective and that the distributed workforce. Now, whether you like it or not, and whether I like it or not, people of my age or a different generation to me, younger generation to me, but we tend to be more regimented about it. There are people who say that Gen Z, when they have a mortgage and a family and a dog and kids, their attitudes will differ. I don't think so. So there is a sort of there's a confluence here between the impact of AI, people wanting to have more flexible lives. Maybe they'll be happier. I mean, maybe the happiness index will go up. Work-life balance. And it won't be that they're lazy, but they just enjoy life better than we did or had the opportunity to. But there's an interesting thing that I think that's going to happen where AI will enable that and give workers more flexibility. So I don't think, if it does reduce the demand for employment, and a lot of people who say it won't, that we will create more jobs, and they say, every technological revolution, people have said we're going to lose our jobs, and it never turns out that way. This might be the first time, but and Keynes may prove to be right, but a little bit later. So I think net destroyer, in my view, but it's impacting our industry significantly. But I come back to the point I made a little bit of time ago, getting the case studies. The user case studies are really critically important, because without that, we won't get the really big transformation projects.
A final question, and a focused question on India. Has it been a mini India on the promenade this year in your opinion?
Yes, I think it is. I think this is.
And why the interest in India? I mean, I sense a great deal of interest in what
I said, growth. If you're looking...
Would you like to talk a little bit more about I think what people are saying, or how you see that growth story?
Modi has done a fantastic job. He's not just a great prime minister, but he understands brand, and he understands the importance of it. I mean, he is the chief brand officer of India, and some presidents and prime ministers don't think that communication is that important. In our own case, Cameron, and indeed the joint government with the Lib Dems, Cameron and Clegg, did understand that. It was interesting when Theresa May became Prime Minister, she moved the Great Britain campaign, which I still think is the best example of branding, a template for all ministries to use. So you pull it all together. Because the trouble with communications at government level is it becomes disintegrated. Each minister has his favourite agency, relationship, whatever, and they all go off in different directions. Cameron was originally a PR guy. And I think he understood and still understands, as does Nick Clegg, who's now working at Meta, the answer to the importance of communication. And that's central. When Theresa May came in, she moved it out of 10 Downing Street, and she didn't regard herself, I think, as being the chief brand officer. She didn't have time for that. And that's a big mistake. Modi understands that. I think he'll get re-elected. And I think the reason why India is such a focus, I mean, I'm from the UK, and as we were talking about in the preparation for this, India is a bigger economy than the UK, which is distinctly uncomfortable for all us Britons to swallow, just like it's uncomfortable for the Americans to swallow that China might be bigger than the US. So, no, it's growth. It's growth. And India got great core sources of talent, rather like Latin America, which gets underplayed.
Yes, that's true.
Great sources of tech talent, great sources of people. I mentioned Harvard Business School, all the great professors and the dean himself, twice in a row. Where did they come from? They come from India. So I think, and the great entrepreneurs, the Ambanis, the Bhartis, I mean, it's Mittal, I mean, it's extraordinary. So, and those entrepreneurs, having built their businesses in India, and now expanding globally around the world. And so Davos is a good vehicle for them. And you can see, I hate the phrase of global north and global south because it's a mixture of the two. But you can see in this rebalancing of the world economy, this different polarization of the economy, not US dominated. The Americans find that very difficult to come to terms with, particularly the center of America, not so much the East and West Coast and the Republicans. The world is changing, and actually Davos, to your point, reflects that.
Sure.
So where you see the investment being made and the money being spent, you see it around the Arab nations, you see it around India, you see nations that have aspirations and ambitions using it as an experiential vehicle to develop their brands. So it's all part of nation branding.
So Martin, wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Good to
much,
see you.
sir,
Thank
for
you,
being with
Vish.
us.
Thank you.